Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. I was going to make a video response talking about some further thoughts about the historicity of the Exodus, because I've been in some private message correspondence with a user here on YouTube. I was going to do that until I received a comment on my most recent video, and Islam, responding to comments regarding Islam: The Untold Story is the name of my video. I had a user tell me that the UMMAH channel had a 1 hour 40-minute special discussion of the documentary, and the user said, and how it's flawed and dismissed by most modern reputable scholars. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. So I stopped the idea of recording the historicity of the Exodus for the moment and actually watched the whole hour and 40 minutes discussion. And it was 3 individuals. This is a UK show. I watched it here on YouTube, and I wrote some notes and decided to respond because I've watched Tom Holland's documentary, as all of you know, and I watched it a number of times. And in fact, after I do this video, I'll probably watch it again, just to verify what was said in response to his video. So I wrote a number of notes. I want to say from the start that watching this video has not changed my attitude towards Tom Holland's documentary. I'm not going to take away anything that I said in my most recent video based on watching this video. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. And I really don't want the user... I want to thank the user who recommended that I watch this. Because, again, as I said in that video of mine, we need to have this continuous dialogue. And this is something that I believe the 3 British Muslims on the show, they were pretty much saying the same thing. I mean, or at least one of the things. At one point they said, we can't be afraid of criticism. We have to explore these facts, etc. So in that spirit, that's why I watched the video. But I'll explain myself. I'll explain why this... and I want to... Again, I'm not trying to say that I think Tom Holland's video needs to be put up on a pedestal and we need to suddenly start going, yes, this is the answer, right? Because he asks more questions than he gives answers. I mean, in my opinion, watching his video, it was a very honest approach for him looking for specific things and not finding it. That was the theme of the whole video. He just asks the question, yeah, so where's the 7th century evidence for any of this stuff? And that's basically what he was asking in the video, in his documentary, excuse me. So this is going to be kind of a hodgepodge because I watched the first half hour and then realized I wasn't taking notes, so I may have forgotten a few things. I have to apologize for that. At some point in this video, they say, and when I say they, I can't remember, I can't attribute who said what at some point. I don't remember, and I don't know any of their names, so I may just have to say they, or it was said, and I apologize for not giving due credit to actually made the following statements or suggestions. It was said at one point that all historians reject Holland et al., and that's my abbreviation. In other words, Holland, Patricia Crone, Michael Cook, their theories. And this was something that was brought up multiple times in the video. They kept saying stuff like, no one accepts their theories. Their theories have been rejected by pretty much every major historian. And I kept asking myself the question, really? All historians, the consensus of all historians, they reject their theories? I don't know about that. I found that kind of fishy. I actually would like to, in all seriousness, see a list of all historians who utterly reject the writings of Patricia Crone and Michael Cook and others. I'd like to see that. They kept focusing on Hagarism, and I've read Hagarism. I have read the majority of Michael Cook and Patricia Crone's works. I've read Hagarism. They focus on Hagarism, and the thing is that it's true. Patricia Crone and Michael Cook have distance themselves from the theories postulated in Hagarism. However, that does not mean that they have abandoned or distanced themselves from the critical methodology of studying history, which the majority of, I guess in this documentary, to use their language, they would say secular or Western historians, academics, use critical historical methodology when analyzing historical documents. So they kept harping about Hagerism. The thing is that, yeah, okay, fair enough, sure. But to ask the question, then they asked the question, why is Patricia Crone even why was she even in the documentary? Because she's a reputable historian who studies Islamic history. So just, it's like, for example, I'll just use myself as an example. I have old videos on this channel because I don't delete anything, right? And as you all know, my personal views have changed over the years. So when someone comes along and watches one of my videos from like 2 years ago, and then watches one of my videos now, they're going to go, there's a discrepancy, right? I'm talking about things in my past videos that I'm not talking about now. And my views from the past have evolved to now. Patricia Crone and Michael Cook went through a very similar thing. If you compare Hagerism to their more recent works, it is different. But if you look at their more recent works, they have not abandoned the critical methodology of history. So, yeah, they may have said, okay, look, some of the theories we said in Hagerism, maybe we don't actually, believe that anymore. We don't actually uphold those theories. But Patricia Crone, as she said in the documentary, in Tom Holland's documentary, she made her position very clear, which is when he asks her, how much can we say about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the early history of Islam, she straight up just says, not very much. And so she still has these views, and it would be important to understand her perspective even post-Hagerism. So to be harping on Hagerism, that's a red herring, completely. Then they mentioned the Hadiths, the Sirah, but not Muslim or non-Muslim criticisms of the science of Hadith. I was reminded of Jeffrey Lang's book again, that I've mentioned, Losing My Religion, that I mentioned in the previous video to this one. One thing that I thought that, they accused Tom Holland of being disingenuous. I don't want to accuse anybody of being disingenuous. But I think if you're going to present the science of Hadith, I think that you should mention to your viewers that there are these... The uniform idea about Hadiths, it doesn't exist. There is no uniform understanding of Hadiths, whether we're talking about classical scholars up to the present, right? You're going to have these various views about authentic Hadiths. Are all Hadiths in Bukhari authentic? What criteria should we judge Hadiths? How have Hadiths been judged? Have there been criticisms? When was the writing of the Sirahs? Are they authentic? Do they contain authentic traditions? Which traditions in the Sirahs are not authentic and which are, according to many people, not authentic? These are questions that we need to ask and be consistent about this. They mentioned Ira and the statement made by Ira. I mentioned that in my previous video, and Stop Spamming refuted Ira, and we'll get to that in a moment. Oh yeah, they also mentioned a 7th century non-Muslim text, but I know they did not quote the whole thing because I've read the whole quotation. They mentioned 2 documents that was also mentioned by Ira, and I want to say that they do talk about non-Arab, non-Muslim sources in the 7th century that seem to talk about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the origin or the beginnings of Islam. And the thing is that when you could look at these non-Muslim sources dating from this early strata, when you compare them to to the established Muslim origin narrative of these things, they do not match up. The very earliest strata does not match up. Who Muhammad was, what his goals were, even there's one document that states that he was alive when, according to the Islamic traditions, he was supposed to be dead. What his goals were. Other sources talk about if the Arabs had any scriptures, and when they talk about the scriptures of the Arabs, it's not just the Quran. They mention it in a different way than the early Islamic traditions would suggest. There's a contradiction in stories, essentially. And so I think that could have been dealt with by the panel, by these 3 individuals that were on this TV program, and they didn't. They basically either didn't quote the whole thing verbatim, or, as Ira did, and Stop Spamming pointed this out, they quote, Ira quotes the whole thing, and then it's like, you read the text for what it says, and it doesn't match up what we know about the Islamic origin narrative. And it's not just those 1 or 2 documents. I mean, there's multiple documents and multiple sources that talk about this, and does not match up with the Islamic origin narrative. That needs to be addressed. And some people might say, oh, well, Jews and Christians and non-Arabs talking about the Arabs. I mean, how reliable can that be? But I think I may have said in a past video, something to the effect of, when we look at, Jewish history, when we look at other ancient history, even people who are not members of the group being discussed will talk about that group, and there is corroboration going on, right? It may not be clear. It may not be as clear as the actual in-group's personal history of their own, or organized religion or people, but there is some sort of corroboration. This is like, these things just don't match up, and that probably should have been addressed by the panel, but they didn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Then it was mentioned the non-Muslim testimony. Oh yeah, they say that the non-Muslim testimony backs up the Islamic one, but no, most of the time it doesn't. It contradicts. And the difference between the two is that this is documentation. This is stuff that's being written down by people who are eyewitnesses to the happenings, dated to the 7th century, and and that's something that needs to be taken into account, the dating of these things. They say that Holland thinks Muslims are dumb. Like, this is something they also harped on. At one point, someone said that there was, like, racism, right? It's like, oh, the Muslims can't talk about their own history. We can't trust them with their own history. He never said that. He never said that. So, I mean, to me, this is like, these are fallacies left and right. These are red herrings that have no business if we're going to take this subject seriously. At some point, I thought it was insinuated that Holland was saying that Muhammad never existed. Right? He never said that. To my knowledge, did he actually say Muhammad never existed? I think they might be confusing with Robert Spencer's book, Did Muhammad Exist? But Robert Spencer, and that's probably the only book by Robert Spencer that I've actually read, because the majority of that book is what Tom Holland did. Robert Spencer just presents the quotes from all these early non-Arab Muslim sources, talking about what could be considered Islam or the early Arab conquest, and what picture they paint. And he just says, look, this is the picture they paint. But no one's denying that Muhammad did not exist. Everyone agrees that Muhammad exists. There are people out there who think Jesus didn't exist, but the majority of historians, from my understanding, according to people like Bart Ehrman, and I've read his book on Jesus, they agree that Jesus existed. Then they mention, let's see here, why would... Oh yeah, they're talking about the coins. At one point they were talking about the coins being mentioned in the documentary, and they say, one of the panelists says something to the effect of, why would they show the prophet? Like, why would they depict the prophet on these coins? Why would they mention him, etc.? Well, Muslims eventually did mention the prophet. The point that Tom Holland's making is, why did it take so long for there to be minted on their coins any mention of Allah, Muhammad, the Quran, Islam, etc., until a certain point later, right? No archaeological evidence for Muawiyah. Oh yeah, so they bring up a point like, oh, Muawiyah doesn't, all the archaeological evidence doesn't seem to paint a picture of Muawiyah being this heavily devoted Muslim. And I mentioned this in my last video, and they just say that there is historical evidence, and I want to know by who, when was it written? Are they contemporaries to Muawiyah? Are these verbatim They mention his sermons. When were these sermons recorded? Were they contemporaries of Muawiyah? Those are questions that need to be asked. The contemporary archaeological evidence shows that Muawiyah apparently didn't bother to mention anything about his religion. A caller calls in and mentions an ancient Greek source about the people of Athens, and says, well, wait, if historians are going to question the Islamic sources, why accept this ancient document? And I just wanted to point out that no one totally accepts all ancient historical sources. As Bart Ehrman articulates when talking about historical methodology and being critical and talking about Jesus, this is just an example. We can't say for certain we know what happens in the past. That's the point of critical academic historical study. We can only take with what we have to try and understand the past and build a picture. We can't say for certain unless you have a video camera, unless you have a picture, modern recording technology. We can't say for certain that occurred. according to the critical methodology. So this is again a red herring. Oh, well, they accept this Greek thing. Well, they may accept it because it's maybe the only document about the people of Athens that we have, perhaps. And I forget which document they were even talking about. But again, I thought that was a little... let's see here. Rejected the historical methodology. Oh yeah. Again, they mentioned that that their methodology, or Holland's methodology, has been rejected by who? And that's what I want to know. By who? Again, I would like to bring in Bart Ehrman's view of Jesus and compare it to the study of Muhammad. Right. The critical historical methodology, as I mentioned, we need to keep this keep this in mind. At the end, there's a discussion of the Hadith. And again, I was thinking of Jeffrey Lang, of people who are critical of the Hadith methodology, both Muslim and non-Muslim. We need to keep these things in mind. So yeah, I think that was pretty much everything. Again, and the biggest thing, like I said, is that there was no attempt. Because they essentially just said, oh, well, no one accepts this, even though in the documentary there are other historians that agree with Tom Holland. And to be fair, the panel mentioned a few of these individuals. Again, not all of them agree on everything. This is the thing about these different individuals. These different academics may agree on some things, but not on everything. But they're all bound by this academic critical scholarship when studying history, which is not going to jive very well with individuals who don't want to be critical, or at least ask questions, these serious questions about these sources. So this is why we're having this conflict. This is why the topic, they couldn't get really, the panel of this in this YouTube channel couldn't get past the whole oral tradition debate. And so they just said, well, we accept oral tradition, they don't, they're wrong. Apparently all historians reject Tom Holland, or there's a consensus apparently that reject his methodology and the people who he represents or who he collaborated with. And there was no attempt to address the points mentioned in the documentary. And so far, the comments I've received, because I've mentioned Tom Holland, have just been like, oh, that's been refuted. Oh, that was a ridiculous documentary. Oh, why pay attention to that? That was ridiculous. We should point-by-point refutation. That's what we need. If someone thinks Tom Holland's wrong, there needs to be a point-by-point refutation to things he presented, instead of just saying, oh, well, this is just, a blah documentary. That's not going to get us anywhere. The people of UMMAH, of this UMMAH channel, said they were going to do some sort of actual 3-part refutation. If that's been made, someone link it to me. I'd love to see it. But I still think that this was not the best attempt at responding to Tom Holland. And if someone thinks that they can respond to him, I think that hopefully we can have a better job in the future. Thank you all for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Almighty God be with you all. Peace.